Now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In full disclosure, I'm a Black woman growing up in America who was raised in a red line neighborhood and who once I was working as a full-time unpaid congressional intern and working 3 part-time jobs, piecing together various money orders to pay rent, to pay utilities. I cashed my check at a check cashing facility. And I did that because that is what I grew up in proximity to. Neighborhoods like Boston and Dorchester and Roxbury and East Boston, which I represent in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, predominantly Black, Hispanic, Latinx, have 57% of the city's check cashing locations, yet only 12% of the city's commercial bank branches. So for my constituents and the estimated 1 in 5 people across America who are unbanked or underbanked, lack of access and fractured trust with financial institutions is incredibly expensive. The cost of cashing checks alone can cost up to $2,400 for households with an annual income of $32,000, just cashing checks. That doesn't even include the costs and penalties of payday loans and the cost of not having credit. Being credit invisible can make it virtually impossible to finance a car, an education, a home, and even a cell phone plan. Banking institutions understand the power of their products. It is not an accident that communities of color have less access to the wealth-building resources and services that banks offer, but are instead surrounded by high-cost, exploitive options like payday lenders and pawn shops. Banking deserts and the implicit and explicit exclusionary practices of financial institutions are widening the racial wealth gap, and we need bold legislative action to build an inclusive, equitable economy. Ms. Baradaran, I briefly described how few commercial bank branches exist in the communities of color in my district and throughout the country. However, these communities do have post offices. Can you describe how an expansion of USPS services to include banking would remove structural barriers for people who are unbanked?
Thank you so much for the question and for drawing attention to the structural inequalities here. The reason why those neighborhoods do not have banks was very much a policy decision, and as Mr. Pawar said earlier, that is why credit is public policy, because the majority of credit products that are historically have built the middle class were underwritten, guaranteed by the federal government, and those communities that were redlined just specifically because they were Black or brown did not get those loans. So that's what we mean by credit is a public policy issue. And same with the payment system. The Federal Reserve controls the payments. We have ID requirements because Congress has decided, I think rightfully, that we want to make sure people aren't sending money for illegal things through the banking system. This is how the public structure of the banking system works. And certain communities have been left out of that historically. And those communities not only didn't get the credits to build wealth, and didn't get to, that's why we have the racial wealth gap, but also, the salt on the wounds is exactly as you said, the check cashing fees, the overdraft fees, the payday lending fees. So we're talking about even people who are banked, who have to go get a payday loan because of these structural inequalities, end up paying way more than others. So that's just salt on the wounds. That's not even getting to the structural roots of these issues. And the postal bank, exactly, is just one solution of many that we need to really tackle this massive problem. And that's just because it's already there. Those neighborhoods trust it. We're not talking about the bells and whistles, but those can come later once people get that account. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Pawar, how would some of the greatest challenges of being unbanked be solved by a national baby bonds program? Senator Booker and I have introduced the American Opportunity Accounts Act, which would ensure that every child at birth not only has a basic savings account, but also has that account is seeded with funds to be used for wealth building activities like starting a business or buying a home. Could you offer your opinion on the benefits of baby bonds?
Yes.
There you are, Mr. Pawar.
Thank you for that question. One of the things that we have learned over the last 18 months that pre-existed before the pandemic is that we lack the financial infrastructure to deliver cash to people quickly. And so when we think about baby bonds or we think about Fed accounts, what we need to do is have a base level of infrastructure so that everyone can access benefits that they are entitled to. They can receive money, they can pay bills, et cetera, et cetera. So it would simply function as a conduit to be able to have that money parked somewhere safely without subject to extraction and in a way that is accessible universally to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlelady's time has